Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality you would expect right there from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions on the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like us and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would like it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with friends, all that good stuff. Joining me today, we have Cameron Abbott back on the show. How you doing, Cam?
Doing good, Trevor. How are you?
Doing good. We're going to be talking all about the Disney classic film Robin Hood today, the animated one from 1973. And I throw this out there. So I picked this originally just because I was looking for something to do. Originally, the plan was going to be around this week. Dinosaurs came out. Frank has been really excited to do an episode on dinosaurs, but Frank's PC crashed last weekend. We just have terrible luck with PCs, apparently, in our little That Nerdy Site circle. So with him kind of out of commission, I was like, all right, let me just go to a Disney Plus randomizer. I kind of Googled that, and the movie that it pulled up and suggested was Robin Hood. And I was like, I like Robin Hood. Sure, that works. And I got about 5 minutes into Robin Hood before I was like, oh, hey, this will probably be really good with SEO with all of the Robin Hood stuff going on with GameStop and the stonk market and all that crap. Just a fun little fitting piece. But it's also, a great Disney film. So I threw it out there in the chat, and you were like, I would love to hop on. And so we got Cam joining me for this episode as well. What's your history with Robin Hood, Cam?
I mean, it's one of the earliest films I remember seeing and watching as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like a lot of young boys, I was enraptured by the story of Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Whether it was just the idea of enacting righteous and like morally justified violence on people who deserve it is like it's very much like a childhood fantasy. Like you're the good guy fighting the bad guy kind of thing. And Robin Hood is a great example of that. And as you get older, you find out like the actual legend and story and everything about that, and how it's actually far more about like the politics of the day with like fiefdom, lords, like usurpation of a crown, like all sorts of stuff that goes into the story of it. But the great thing about Robin Hood is there's a million different variations of it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that there are.
Yeah, and I still think that this hilarious and wonderful anthropomorphic version of it is right there up at the top with so many others, whether it's Men in Tights or King of, like, what is it? It's Prince of
Thieves. Yeah, the Kevin Costner one. Yeah,
Kevin Costner one, which is just like so good, but also like really great. We are not going to mention the one by Russell Crowe because that one was terrible.
So the one I saw most recently a couple years ago was the Taron Egerton one. Which was also...
Oh, I really wanted that one to be good.
Yeah, it just was not. It has cool moments in its like approach to combat and stuff, and it was interesting, kind of giving it a more like modern day militaristic approach. Like the whole thing is like the Crusades that Robin goes off and fights. And comes back from, are shot almost as if it's like, cut scenes from Black Hawk Down or something like that. Like
really?
they're all in like camo garb kind of stuff. It's really weird. And they've got like automatic crossbows that are up there shooting like turret fire basically. And that's basically like the opening of the film. And it's like, okay, this is going to be a different tone because it's still very much a period piece, but it's like a period piece with like a modern flair and a modern sensibility to it.
Yeah, that's what I was looking forward to.
And then it just doesn't really do a lot of interesting stuff with that. Easily the standout for me, in kind of continuing in his role in this little niche in recent years was Ben Mendelsohn as the Sheriff of Nottingham type character. I don't think he's actually the sheriff of Nottingham, but like he's basically fulfilling that role. And he's just,
Mm-hmm.
he has emerged in the last 5 to 10 years as just like a great quintessential bad guy. And
Yeah.
he has a fun time kind of like milking every little bit of the scenery on that, chewing every little bit of the scenery. But yeah, overall, not a great version. So yeah, like thinking back on the Robin Hoods, this is probably my favorite. And then Robin Hood Men in Tights, which I just haven't seen all that much, is
Oh,
probably
really? It
number
was
two.
a
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
like
That was a staple in the Abbott household.
yeah,
Anything Mel Brooks was a staple in the Abbott household.
yeah, it was something
Um,
I like. That was the kind of movie I didn't really watch like in my own house, but like I would watch it at friends at sleepovers and stuff like that. And I remember in particular in high school we did like a variety show that the students would put on every year, every other year, something like that. And one of the acts was a bunch of my friends got together and basically did the Men in Tights like song and dance routine, and they did it on this like very
yes.
tiny little like 12 foot by 8 foot stage that we had kind of set up. It was like very dangerous. They almost like flew off the set a couple times, but they had a great time with it. It was a lot of fun, and so that's like one of the memories that certainly stands out the most as a result. But yeah, this movie for me, I was thinking about it as I was watching it this time around, and especially as I was like looking and doing the history of it. The fact that came out in 1973. This and Star Wars are probably the two movies from before I was born that I have seen the most in my life.
Mm.
And this being 4 years before the original Star Wars is probably the oldest movie that I've seen, certainly more than once, but like just the oldest movie and the most viewings, kind of like that cross line. Because I like really don't watch a lot of old movies, even like a lot of the critically acclaimed films. I've just never really gone back and really watched. Like Godfather is one of those up there that I just have never seen. And so yeah, like I would and realizing like I probably didn't realize that this was a movie from the 70s growing up because we had the VHS of it and just like
Yeah.
wore that tape out like crazy. And so I probably just thought it was like from my childhood and from the 90s or something like
Well,
that. And it wasn't until later that I realized,
mhm.
oh, it was Disney opening the vault back up and stuff.
Yeah. I was about to bring that up. I was actually bringing up that like it's the same thing Disney does whenever there's a new technology. They take the classic library of animated films. Around this time was Pinocchio, Robin Hood. Like all these came out and it kind of like set like Robin Hood especially I think set a catalyst for these ideas of action and adventure films for children. Because right after Robin Hood gets re-released on VHS, you have Aladdin, you have like Aladdin comes out not too long after that. You have trying to think what else, Lion King a few years later. Like this rejuvenation of of films targeted towards young boys,
Mm-hmm.
especially is I don't like I think it's partly the lucrative toy market, and on top of that, the just it's great to look back and see that there was a period of time that uh, greatly catered to young men, like boys, in such a way um, that at the same time it feel like there was such a weird time in history where not a weird time, it's been most of history where there's been a gender gap
Yeah.
between in media. I was going to say it's such a weird, it's like, but
Now is the
we're in the
weird
weird
time
time.
where we're
Yeah,
finally
now's the weird
like
time.
reconciling with that and
Yeah,
addressing it.
we reconciled that because, and it's interesting because there was always an Aladdin, and then then it's like a princess film or a female led film, and you had those kind of bouncing back and forth, whether it was Beauty and the Beast, which was definitely aimed more for like its traditional Disney princess film, in that regard. Uh, Actually, I think Beauty and the Beast is perhaps the no, because there's a Little Mermaid as well. So like you do have these
Yeah,
like
I mean,
female lead
like
driven
this came out
films.
around the kind of the renaissance
Yeah.
of the film market. Was kind of Disney staking a claim with those big puffy VHS tapes. You had those kind of hitting the home market at the same time. Little Mermaid was coming, then it was Aladdin, then Beauty and the Beast, and then
Mm-hmm.
Lion King was kind of like
Okay.
the prime area there. Then you get into like Pocahontas and Hunchback of Notre Dame and stuff like that, and it starts falling off a little bit again from the highs of highs there. But yeah, it was certainly I think a very cool time, especially like because this was like prime when I was growing up, and yeah, it was just a very exciting time to be getting into Disney stuff, and really enjoying that. One of the trivia bits that I have up here was that this was the first VHS in the line of Walt Disney Classics. So like when they were bringing kind of things out of the vault, this was the first one they really threw out there. So that was a fun little interesting tidbit.
And coming out at the right time too with all the Robin Hood. There was like this Robin Hood revival in like the late 80s, early 90s that just kind of took off throughout the 90s where Robin Hood, I mean, one, it's in public domain.
Yeah.
So it's free. But on top of that, there was just something about like everybody was doing their own interpretation of Robin Hood. And kind of got beat to death by the end of it. But, this is an example of the great ones.
Yeah, I remember when the people over at Honest Trailers did their Honest Trailer of the Taron Egerton Robin Hood a couple years ago or a year ago, whenever it was. In there, they included how there were like 6 other Robin Hood movies in development. And it seems like that's kind of always the case. There's always a ton of Robin Hood projects in development, in film, or in TV. One of the things I pulled in, we'll get into in a second, was like I looked up like all of the interpretations of Robin Hood, in film and TV over the years, and it is a large Wikipedia page, and I'm sure it is missing a ton of things. But yeah, a little bit of the history lesson. As we've kind of alluded to, this was originally released November 8th, 1973. Other notable films of the time, I didn't actually do like here's what came out in November, but I did just pull up as we've been talking. The highest grossing films of 1973, you had The Exorcist at number 1, The Sting at number 2, American Graffiti, number 3. So yeah, George Lucas kind of making his debut there. Film I've never heard of called Papillon.
Papillon.
Yeah.
Papillon. Yeah.
Yeah. That was number 4. The Way We Were was number 5. Magnum Force was number 6.
Wow.
Clint Eastwood as Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
And Robin Hood here was number 7 that year. It was the 7th highest grossing film in 1973. And then lastly, we had Live and Let Die, Bond film. So take that, Logan, Robin Hood beating out Bond. The original Walking Tall, not obviously not the remake of it many years later featuring The Rock, and Serpico, Al Pacino in Serpico was
what
number
an amazing
10.
year for film.
Yeah.
Holy crap! So Papillon is a Steve McQueen film.
Yeah.
So this is literally like
Steve McQueen, Dustin Hoffman. Yep.
Yeah, this is a murderer's row of incredible films that came out in 1973. Holy crap! I didn't even think about it. Serpico. Oh man, wow.
Yeah. So very, very notable lineage around this time. The film itself has a runtime of 1 hour and 24 minutes. In the Disney animated timeline of things, this came out between The Aristocrats, which had come out in December of 1970, and The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which would come out March of 1977. So this was in that era where it was basically 3 to 4 years between movies because they weren't churning them out in the more or less annual basis that we get these days, and then
and everything was still hand drawn on paper at the time too.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and you see that a little bit in this film with the amount of sequences that are just like reused throughout, which I'm sure I've noticed
the running
growing up as a kid.
Running, yes.
Yeah, but even like during the opening credits, like the whole parade march just gets completely recycled later on during the competition. So,
everything about it is.
And then there's also
recycled a lot,
we'll touch on. I have in the trivia like there are sequences that are pulled from other movies as well. That are just kind of like basically reskinned. And how we would think of it these days. In the Robin Hood timeline, as I touched on, I went and kind of tried to look this up. There was I don't remember what it was. I think it was called Hammer. It was a series that did like a lot of horror films. There were a lot of like Robin Hood movies done by them or projects done by them in between these two big ones that I've pulled. But these were the more notable ones. One that we touched on way back in our episode on Darby O'Gill was the story of Robin Hood and his merry men. The Disney like live action one that came out in 1952. That featured Richard Todd as Robin and Joan Rice as Maid Marian. And then a few years after this one came out, you had Robin and Marian in 1976, featuring Sean Connery as Robin. Again, a nice little tie to that Darby O'Gill episode, and Audrey Hepburn as Maid Marian. I didn't realize Audrey Hepburn.
That one's actually that's actually a really good one. Because it's Audrey Hepburn, so of course she's phenomenal in it. Mm-hmm. No, I will say like let's just call it what it is. It is what it is. Darby O'Gill and the Little People is the D+ episode that just keeps coming back.
I touched on this.
It keeps coming around again.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember if I mentioned this on the show itself. But I think, like I mentioned it in kind of our year one wrap up stuff that we were talking about in the post I had published on that. Darby O'Gill is our most viewed episode of that D+ show because it saw like a ginormous spike on St. Patrick's Day last year of people just kind of Googling the film and thinking they were going to find it on YouTube and finding our stupid podcast instead, our audio only podcast.
Yeah,
instead.
An audio only podcast of it.
So it's got like an average view time of like 10 seconds, but yeah, like had a ton of views that day. And I was going back and doing kind of the retrospective year look back, and I was like, what the hell happened in March? Because I just saw this like giant spike, and sure enough, yeah, it's St. Patrick's Day. Ton of people looking for Darby O'Gill there. So
that's how you know. That's how you know it's a classic film. It's a great film.
Yeah.
People want to get drunk and watch Sean Connery mouth the song being sung by somebody else.
Yeah, there you go.
Gosh, no, I love like the 70s was such a great time for film on so many levels, but like whether it was animation, whether it was like you have the rise of the film class, like the film school kids with Kubrick, Lucas, and Spielberg.
Yep.
Like this is their time. This is where they're coming in. 73 you had American Graffiti. In 75 you're going to have Jaws. Like the film that defines and establishes the trend of a summer blockbuster.
Yep.
Because before that, you put movies out in summer to die. Jaws changes everything with that.
Yep.
Like this is so much of what we know today as the film industry foundation is laid in the late 60s throughout the 70s going into the 80s. Like that era of Hollywood has defined even up to now ours. Where like we look at our current creative groups in Hollywood right now, and they're just going back and taking ideas from the 70s and bringing them forward.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
One of the things in here, kind of jumping ahead a little bit to the trivia that I think kind of speaks to what you're talking about there a little bit, is this was the final film worked on, I believe, the final film. Yeah, this is the last Disney animated movie that all of Disney's 9 old men would live to see completed. Those 9 old men were Milt Kahl, Mark Davis, Frank Thomas, Eric Larson, Ollie Johnston, Wooly Reitherman, Les Clark, Ward Kimball, and John Lounsbury. And for those that aren't familiar, and I didn't know too much about them really, like I'd heard the name a lot, but I looked into it a little bit when doing kind of the research for this movie. Disney's 9 old men were basically like his core group of animators from, this era and kind of the era leading up to this, that really helped define and establish American animation. They put together kind of the 12 rules or 12 like guidelines for animation, and a lot of animation, even still to this day, people kind of trace their lineage of like who did you study under, going back to the 9 old men. It'd be like, so like so and so apprenticed under so and so, who apprenticed under so and so, who apprenticed under Frank Thomas or something like that, and they kind of like carry that lineage, as a badge of honor, much in a way that like I think of all of the directing teachers I had in college in acting classes and stuff that would talk about how they had studied with Uta Hagen, or they had studied with somebody who had studied with Uta Hagen or something like that, and just
Yeah.
kind of that like very artistic nature of the teacher and the student kind of and that lineage, almost like the Sith. There can be a master, there can be apprentice.
Well, it's really just it speaks to the tradesman aspect of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you talk about like when you get into like these professional levels of anything, when it comes to the arts especially, who you trained under says a lot about, okay, whether or not, like, it's not just a badge of honor. It says what you can kind of expect from somebody
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, but it also means that you, like, if you studied under somebody, then you can expect them to have a certain degree, like a certain pedigree associated with them, that they're willing to do what it takes to do that. Now, it's definitely gotten way more convoluted and, like, I'd say borderline asinine when it comes to like acting and stuff, because there's a billion jokes. There's a billion and one jokes about it. About like studying under somebody who studied under the person who studied under the person who studied under, like, somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you look at like Arrested Development does it best, where it's like, well, I've been studying under the professional work under Carl Weathers.
Yeah.
You have these you have a lot of these aspects to it, but this is a real, especially with animation and stuff, there's people who teach themselves, and then there's people who learn. And the people who learn, who end up doing great things and who dream of doing these great things, dream of studying under people who studied under the nine old men.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and even if, and here's a even bigger note, even if you didn't learn from them, you weren't apprenticed to them, I guarantee that you have somebody who you idolized and who you learned from, like, by watching their work,
Mm-hmm.
came from the nine old men.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's the nine old men's work themselves or any of their apprentices, you've probably based your work off of somebody in relation to that. Like, it's the way it is.
Yeah. That's the pulling from the Wikipedia page on Disney's Nine Old Men, talking to that, another important component of Nine Old Men's legacy, and many animators in contemporary animation industry who can directly identify or trace their training to someone, basically as a student of Cal Arts in particular. For example, Wayne Unton, the supervising animator for Elsa in Disney's Frozen, has noted that he apprenticed with John Ripa, who in turn apprenticed with Glenn Keane, who in turn apprenticed with Johnston. They're the 12 basic principles of animation is kind of what they worked on and refined. And those 12 principles are: 1, squash and stretch; 2, anticipation; 3, staging; 4, straight ahead action and pose to pose; 5, follow through and overlapping action; 6, slow in and slow out; 7, arcs; 8, secondary action; 9, timing; 10, exaggeration; 11, solid drawing; and 12, appeal. So shout out to all of them.
I have to say, like, you can really tell when people don't follow those rules in animation,
Mm-hmm.
because it just doesn't look right.
It looks different, and unless it's done like with intentional subversion behind it, it usually just doesn't hit right. And it's one of those things, like, I don't know if we'll ever do an episode on it on D Plus show, but like, I hated the live action, quote unquote, live action Lion King, because you can't do expressive animation with like CGI realism that they were driving for in that you can with the character models in the animated Lion King. And you lose, that's like the biggest thing that gets lost in a lot of these live action translations is like the fun joy of, characters where if you freeze frame at the right moment, you're going to see something that can never exist in any kind of like reality. But it adds to kind of a comedic moment, or because it just makes their face that much more expression like. diving back into the roll call of the film, this film was directed by Wolfgang Reitherman, who was a lot of this era kind of shares a lot of people across a lot of the movies. So he had done 101 Dalmatians, as well as The Sword and the Stone and The Jungle Book, as well as The Aristocrats, and then he went on to do The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh and The Rescuers. So basically he was kind of the go-to director there for a good chunk of the 60s and 70s Disney animation. The writers, the story was written by Larry Clemens, who had also done the Jungle Book and The Aristocrats, and would go on to do Winnie the Pooh, Rescuers, and The Fox and the Hound. And story sequences by Ken Anderson, who had been working on stuff all the way back to Cinderella. He also worked on the Jungle Book and The Aristocrats, and Winnie the Pooh and The Rescuers. Vance Gary did The Jungle Book, The Aristocrats, Winnie the Pooh, Rescuers, Fox and the Hound, Black Cauldron, and and he of this bunch worked the latest because he went up through The Great Mouse Detective, Oliver and Company, and even up through Hercules, which we've done an episode on. Frank Thomas did The Aristocats and Rescuers. Eric Clayworth did The Aristocats and Winnie the Pooh. Julius Svensson did The Aristocats and Winnie the Pooh as well. And David Michener did Rescuers, would go on to do, this was his first of kind of his Disney era, but he would go on to do Rescuers, Fox and the Hound, and The Great Mouse Detective after that. So, like, a lot of those were clearly, like, Disney had a writer's room at this time, and they were just, constantly. And it's one of those things I never thought about until probably this viewing, where I'm going through and like, I'm watching the movie, and I'm like, yeah, I guess there are a lot of like little like standalone sequences that don't need to be in this movie at all, but they kind of help flesh it out, and they just add extra fun to it and joy to it, or kind of help establish the world around them. Like I think in particular of like the Little Rabbit family, and the kid who really wants to be Robin Hood and his sisters, and their little tortoise friend. And like you could take like the whole birthday scene out of the film entirely, and you're not losing anything. But like,
but you lose so much. You lose the sheriff being just like an absolute scumbag. You miss.
I mean, yes, but you also get him doing that in like 3 other scenes. So I'm saying like you could cut and like pick and choose scenes.
But he's stealing from children.
He steals from the church. He steals from Robin Hood there when he's like alms for the poor. Like, yeah, he is a sleazebag. And you definitely don't want to cut all of them, but like it does like help. It helped me realize, like, oh yeah, I get that. Like,
it fleshes it out so much, though. It does so much work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they didn't cut it. I'm just saying they could because they could.
Yeah, like it's not integral to the plot.
It is like a lot of the Disney movies of this era. It's like the central plot is like 30 minutes, and clearly that wasn't going to make for feature length film, so they add a whole bunch of stuff in there to like flesh it out and stretch it out, even if it's not in direct service of Robin Hood versus Prince John getting back Maid Marian.
Yeah, I mean, like, to be fair, did we need the subplot of how horny the bear was for the chicken? No. We didn't need that.
Or the rhino that gets horny for Little John when he's dressed as the fortune teller. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Oh man, gosh, there's so many. Oh, there's so many amazing. There's so many amazing, like, just. I'm sorry, I'm just like going through my head again.
Little moments like that. That like there were a couple in here that I was like, that feels like a modern beat. Like there, I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was like that's something that I would like. It sounded like it was maybe it was a Robin Hood line or something like that, but it sounded like something he just kind of like threw off mic, off script or something like that, and they liked it and kept it in or something like that. There are like a couple of those moments that like just felt like the more improvisational nature that I think we see in some modern day comics and stuff like that, or cartoons.
I would also say that like there's that moment, and once again I'm going back to the beginning of the film, but it's so great. I can't imagine how annoying doing the lip sucking across the rings must have been as an animator. And he like definitely doesn't need it. But man, doesn't that tell you like Robin and Little John do not leave a stone unturned.
Mm-hmm.
They go in for all it's worth. They don't leave anything behind if they don't have to. Like it, and like they get enamored with like jewels and gold and the greed, and like they use it for like the good of the people.
Yeah.
But the idea of getting it, I would really love to have a film or have a show explore kind of a like that level of like I guess like a modern telling of it would definitely focus more on the fact like Robin and Little John and the Band of Merry Men get off on stealing from rich people
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in a way more like fleshed out, realized way. I
Mm-hmm.
think that could be done really cool. Because I don't like I'm looking back on it and I don't ever remember it like Robin's always like money pshaw who like we'll give it to the poor like it's for the poor haha.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really more for my political ambitions of trying to like dethrone or like upset Prince John and keep him from like securing the throne.
Yeah.
Um,
And this one, it is just
versus
much more like they have fun stealing that
Fun.
stuff. Like they
Yeah.
have, like Robin has fun getting into disguises and dressing up and pretending to be these characters and stuff. Yeah, I think that's
challenging himself with the stork outfit to like how difficult it is for him to shoot the bow with that, but he just like you can tell he's doing it to challenge himself and give himself a handicap, and he'll still
Yeah.
knock it out of the park.
yeah,
Like just it's such a like the fun that Robin Hood and Little John have in this one are and the like just everybody gets to have so much fun. You get like these cute, adorable rabbit children and their tortoise friend. Uh, and the tortoise friend is, of course, the geeky, nerdy kid with glasses and the bow tie and just like, yeah, make Marion. Oh, it's so good.
hmm
It's so good. It's so. I love it. Like it's so dear to my heart. I love this film so much,
yeah,
and it hits it on every single level of whether it's the music, whether it's the just the script, like the actual dialogue in it is so good. The characterization. You have oh my gosh, you have Prince John as this like he's a lion, but he's a cowardly lion,
yeah,
and he sucks his thumb and he calls out for mommy, and that's such a great parallel to actual like real Prince later than King John, being a total like mama's boy his entire life,
yeah.
letting his mother run his life.
Yeah, I didn't pull that into to the trivia, but there was like IMDb trivia talking about how like it is a very direct homage to the fact that John was very much like babied and kind of spoiled and stuff in the real kind of life story of things. Um,
And he
yeah,
was
let's.
raised in France,
Yeah,
he spent most of his life in France until he became prince and moved over to England. So he was not well liked by anybody
yeah.
to begin with.
Let's dive into the starring here. You have Roger Miller playing Alan Adale, the rooster slash narrator, who is best known as a singer-songwriter known for his honky-tonk influenced country and pop songs of the 50s and 60s. He's probably best known for the song King of the Road. That was certainly like the one that jumped out as me as like, oh, that's this guy. Okay, cool. And then he also wrote the music and lyrics for 1985's Tony Award-winning musical Big River, which is basically the Huckleberry Finn story, but set in a musical. Peter Ustinov plays Prince John here. Prior to this, he'd been in Spartacus. I bring this up because it came up in one of our recent episodes, but he was in the film Death on the Nile as Hercule Poirot.
That's right. He was a Hercule Poirot.
Yeah, he Death on the Nile was like the big one, but he also would play that role in a few other kind of the murder mysteries. He didn't do it in Orient Express, Murder on the Orient Express. That was not in his credits, but yeah, like I saw that and I was like, well, we were just talking about him on one or more of the shows recently, so I'll bring him in here. Terry Thomas playing Sir Hiss was in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, How to Murder Your Wife, and Bang Bang You're Dead. And I really just pulled in those because it seemed like a fun trilogy of movie titles. And honestly, this is one, like, I love this movie so much more than Jungle Book. I never really got into Jungle Book. I never really cared. Like, I watched it, a few times growing up and stuff like that. But if you
I liked it when I was like little kid, but I didn't care for it when I got older.
yeah, and this is largely stemming probably from the fact that Baloo is played by the same actor who plays Little John here. But like, I could have sworn that Hiss was the same kind of thing. Like I thought it was Hiss and played
no.
Ka as well. It's like nope, those are completely two different actors. But like if you had just told me like think about the character of Ka, I would have been thinking about Sir Hiss in that portrayal. Brian Bedford here playing Robin Hood, who had done the film Grand Prix before this, and he did a lot of Shakespeare stuff. So he was in Androcles and the Lion, Richard II, and then one of his latest offerings that he was in was A Christmas Carol the Musical back in 2004. And I bring that up because we did the Muppet Christmas Carol, and so yet another Christmas Carol version. Monica Evans here playing Maid Marian was along with Carol Shelley, who we'll get into as Lady Cluck. Both of them were in the original Odd Couple play and then would go on to be cast in the film as well as the TV series. She also was in the Aristocats prior to this, and Robin Hood appears to have been her final role. She, as of IMDb, still alive and hopefully well. And one of the few, but yeah, she basically Robin Hood was the last credit on her IMDb page. So yeah, Phil Harris, as I mentioned earlier, as Little John. Most notably, prior to this was The Jungle Book Baloo, as well as O'Malley in The Aristocats, and another movie that I watched way too many times growing up, especially for like the quality of the movie, I'm sure, and that's a movie called Rock-A-Doodle. Which was
I love Rock-A-Doodle.
A Don Bluth film.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
Animated film of the early 90s, I think.
Yes, Rock-A-Doodle. It was so good.
Yeah.
Little kid who loves the book, the book Rock-A-Doodle, gets turned into an animated chicken.
Yep.
And has to find Rock-A-Doodle. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that movie is trash. It's absolute garbage. But man, I loved it as a kid.
Yeah.
Holy crap, that's a terrible film.
Yeah.
Like really, just really, really terrible. It's just bad Elvis jokes throughout the entire thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
But man, I love Rock-A-Doodle.
Andy Devine here. Yeah, I want to say who was it? I forgot to pull in the. It was like classic, one of those classic. Glenn Campbell, I think, plays Rock-A-Doodle, if I recall correctly. Andy Devine playing Friar Tuck here. This is where we start seeing some of the westerns that were really influencing, and especially I have a little trivia thing for this, but Andy Devine had been in Stagecoach, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, How the West Was Won, as well as he was in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World with Terry Thomas. Carol Shelley, who I mentioned as Lady Cluck, again in kind of all three iterations of the original Odd Couple there, as well as the Aristocats. And then she would go on to have a much longer running career, including movies that I remember growing up, Jungle to Jungle. She was also in the Disney Hercules as kind of like one of the bit roles. And this blew my mind because it's entirely possible I saw her perform this role. She was the original Madame Morrible in the Broadway musical Wicked. And she was.
Wait, what?
Yeah, she is the original Madame Morrible. So if you have the Wicked original Broadway soundtrack, you're listening to Carol Shelley, and that the name definitely jumped out at me. It's like I recognize this name. Why do I know this name? And so yeah, she was Madame Morrible. She was replaced by Rue McClanahan on May 31st, 2005. So in the history of Trevor, my sister graduated high school in 2005, May of 2005, and our high school choir was going out and performing in New York that year. And my sister and I was 2 years into college at this point. We basically planned a New York trip, and we went to New York for a week and saw a ton of Broadway shows, including Wicked that we saw while we were there. And so I'm like, I probably saw one of her final performances on Broadway as Madame Morrible, and that just I was like, that's crazy. She was also in the 2005 version of Bewitched as Aunt Gladys, I think, in that role. But yeah, the fact that she was in Wicked and that I may have seen her in Wicked, I could verify it because I still have the playbill. It's just in a framed little standee that I have 5 feet that way, basically. And so I could open it up, look at the playbill, and confirm whether or not I saw her or Rue McClanahan. But it's crazy to realize that.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Bewitched, underrated film, very good.
Yeah. And then lastly
Nicole Kidman as Samantha, and Will Ferrell as Darren.
Yep.
Which is like it's a meta telling, like a meta story as well, of like the reboot of Bewitched and everything. It's really good.
Yeah.
However, it has one of the best lines of all cinema history, where Samantha is confessing to Darren. She goes, "I have a secret to tell you. I'm a witch." And he goes, "I have a secret to tell you too. I'm a Clippers fan." And it's just like, just kills me every time.
Nice.
Just kills me every time.
Lastly, I pulled in here Pat Buttram playing Sheriff of Nottingham. Was probably best known as Mr. Haney on Green Acres for many, many years. And that's one of those things, like, I recognize his voice so iconically, and I probably didn't realize that it was also another staple of my childhood, watching Green Acres on Nick at Night, every night growing up or something like that. He was also in The Aristocats, The Rescuers, The Fox and the Hound, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? He's one of the bullets. And probably one of the most iconic things I also recognize him from, Back to the Future Part 3. He is one of the guys in the saloon. One of the old, drunks in the saloon. And then one of his last roles, his last role, it released a year after he passed, was a Goofy movie where he plays the MC at the Possum Show.
Oh my gosh,
yeah. So shout out to Pat Buttram. Some trivia for you. The famous gap in Terry Thomas's teeth was incorporated into the design of the character he voices, Sir Hiss, and it made a handy opening for his forked tongue to dart out. Director Trademark, this is kind of what we alluded to earlier. Wolfgang Reitherman has a lot of reused animation. During the Phony King of England segment in The Forest, the illustrators referred to previous Disney films for inspiration. Maid Marian's dance movements are copied from both Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Duchess from the Aristocats. The animals playing the various instruments are lifted almost verbatim from the Aristocats, which is why you suddenly have like a very kind of like modern looking dog, in that bunch or whatever. Also, the dance between Little John and Lady Cluck is lifted from the dance between Baloo and King Louie in The Jungle Book. And
that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and the shot of the animals marching in the parade at the archery contest is identical to the shot of the same animals leading Prince John's carriage in the forest, as well as I said, kind of the opening sequence during the credits as they roll. It's that whole, they just kind of reuse that animation a couple times. When Robin Hood and Little John first appear on screen, they wander upon a fallen tree which bridges a river, and each cordially insists that the other cross first. This is a friendly subversion of the traditional Robin Hood narrative, in which Robin Hood and Little John meet while crossing opposite sides of a narrow tree bridge and fight over who will be allowed to cross first. The characters of Sheriff of Nottingham, Friar Tuck, Nutsy, and Trigger, the two vultures, were all voiced by actors known for doing westerns. This is because at one point in the production, the setting was the Old West. I thought that was I
did not know that.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting little tidbit.
Huh, that's fun.
Yeah. Monica Evans and Carol Shelley, who we talked as Maid Marian and Lady Cluck, also worked together on the Aristocrats as the voices of the two geese, Abigail and Amelia. And as I mentioned, they were originally paired up in The Odd Couple, both the Broadway play, movie, and the TV show as the Pigeon Sisters. As I mentioned, kind of at the top, this was the last Disney animated movie featuring that all of Disney's 9 old men would live to see completed, as well as this is the first VHS in the Walt Disney Classics line. And then lastly, and you can see this, I didn't actually go back and watch it, but you can on Disney+. A possible ending included Robin Hood being wounded after escaping from the castle. In this ending, Prince John, hooded and cloaked, is about to stab Robin, but is interrupted by the arrival of King Richard. And I also didn't realize until like this watch through that Peter Ustinov plays both John and Richard. Like,
yep.
I just the main on Richard, always just immediately made me think as a kid that it was a different person. Anyway, the filmmakers felt that it made Prince John too sinister and took away from Robin Hood as the hero. It was also seen as too dark a turn from an otherwise upbeat and carefree tone of the movie, so it was deleted and replaced with the ending where Robin Hood not only survives unscathed, but Prince John, Sir Hiss, and the Sheriff of Nottingham are all imprisoned for their treachery, with Alan Adale explaining King Richard's return in front of the wanted poster of Robin Hood that now says, "Pardoned by King Richard" on it. The original ending in storyboard form is included on the Most Wanted Edition DVD, as well as I mentioned, on Disney+. You can watch it under the extras.
That's interesting. That's also like a very violent, like personal attack from an otherwise incredibly cowardly character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Like him hooding himself to stab Robin is pretty out of character for that Prince John that you get throughout the rest of the film. Like
Yeah,
he wants
he's
Robin
very
Hood
happy
dead,
to
but
to have everybody else do it. Yeah.
like, he's never a person who says, "Well, I'll do it myself." Quite the opposite. He will refuse to do it himself.
He is the anti-Thanos.
Yeah. Very much so. Even gets his Infinity
gems,
Gauntlet.
Yeah.
The gems taken.
Yeah. So yeah, how does it hold up? What did you think coming back and watching this, Cam?
It holds up super well. I mean, the great thing about this really old classic style of animation, because it's all hand done. You don't have to worry about the warp effect. You don't have to worry about the new technology being used and doesn't age well. Like you see that all the time with 3D art.
Yeah.
Like just it doesn't hold up whatsoever. Even in films, traditionally 2D films that use 3D animated backgrounds or things like that just do not hold up well. They have to go back and be redone. And that's one thing. But the great thing about something like Robin Hood and the films of its time, Pinocchio and the Aristocrats, and Winnie the Pooh, is that these classic films, like, they have such a rich tone to them, and I don't mean like the sound tone, but like the color tones that they use. There's always like something so vintage and classic about them that I just think it still holds up super well. Sound design stuff, like there's only a limit of what you can do. Once you start bringing things into high definition when it comes to sound, like older audio does take a beating sometimes in certain aspects, like stuff that was done in probably like an ADR booth rather than the actual recording booth is definitely going to come up. You get like some softer tones and pitches to otherwise recorded dialogue. But I think it still holds up. Like it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's relatively short as far as like films go, because that's hour and a half.
Yeah, there's another bit of trivia that I didn't pull in here, but it was something to the effect of like this was the first Disney animated film that ran longer than 80 minutes since like one of the really early ones. I think since Fantasia or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like, and even there, it's like it's an hour and 24 minutes. So it just barely crashes over that. But it's also one of the things that like jumped out at me is they do the whole movie's credits before like before the action. It's not like then the movie ends and it's a long string of things. It was like it's from that era where like the credits are up front and like the credits on Disney Plus are like all for the other versions of it. So it goes immediately into like the Danish version or whatever and like the cast of that. And also it's similar to again Darby O'Gill, which did the same thing. I think we touched on it there. It doesn't credit a ton of people. Like none of the kid voices that play like the Rabbit family and stuff, none of them are credited in this. A lot of like the other voices of like the mouse characters and stuff like that aren't credited. So yeah, let's like shout out to whoever
agents.
Yeah, shout out to whoever on IMDb like went through and like identified and found all those people.
Holy crap!
But yeah, it's because there's a ton of like uncredited other bit parts in here. Because it credits like all the main named characters, including the vultures. Even though the vultures probably have arguably fewer lines than the kids. But yeah, it's like they're credited and then just a ton of people are not.
Well, it's important to note, like, that's super not uncommon, especially for the time, that extras just wouldn't get credited. And it wasn't until, like, the late 70s where the Screen Actors Guild, like, went on strike to do a lot of major reforms, including being required to credit your entire cast. And that was a massive change. It was, it's funny because this is actually, it occurred during the time of, when what's his name? He plays Marty McFly. I can't believe I forgot his name.
Michael J. Fox.
Thank you. Michael J. Fox was getting his start in Hollywood as a television actor, and when they went on strike, he was like struggling. I remember this from a weird, just like News or E channel like documentary about his life. And they like introduce people, but there's like that is just a period of time that is like very much a interesting point where things like credits and films change drastically. So when we watch these older films, if you didn't have representation fighting to get your name on those credits, it wasn't happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because as far as Disney would care, the only name that needs to be on there is Walt's. That's it. That's all that matters to them.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think. No, I'd have to go back and like rewatch, but like a lot of the, like even a lot of the story credit people are uncredited. Like I didn't include it even in here, but like there's a second on IMDb. There's like a second director listed, and it's for basically whoever had directed like all the work that gets reused in this film. And so like by modern standards, they would get some kind of credit in there. And so I think that's what's being reflected. But yeah, like there was the same kind of case in a lot of the writing elements where it was just, yeah, like certain people just weren't getting credited because of the different union rules of the time, certainly. Back to other favorite moments and scenes. I mean, I'll jump out there right out the gate. The whistle song that starts things off is probably again going back to like this being one of the oldest, the mashup of the oldest movie and most times that I've seen an old movie. That is probably one of the songs I have sung the most in my life. Just like the tune of it. Including like I've probably done it on Let's Plays on our channel and stuff when I'm trying to like fill time and not leave like empty space. I just like it like do 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 is just like a default melody that I go to, and it goes all the way back to this movie as just kind of like a staple. And yeah, it is probably the number one melody I have sung the most throughout my life. I have, big flurries where I sang a ton of Hamilton songs a few years ago and stuff like that. But like over time, that one just is so ingrained in me that it stays. And it doesn't help or it doesn't hurt matters that it also became like that meme thing with like the dancing frog or whatever a number of years back, like one of those early internet memes. And stuff like that. But yeah, like the music that song and Oodalali just are like so ingrained in my childhood that like immediately they just come flooding back whenever I hear them and whenever I decide to sit down and watch this, because this is probably the first time I've watched this. Like I may not have even watched it like when it came to DVD. Like I probably haven't watched this in many years.
This is the advantage of being an uncle, is that I have seen this film very recently.
I bet. Yeah. But yeah, definitely like all that fun stuff still holds up, and the inclusion of kind of a known quantity in terms of the singer as Alan Dale there, like probably even helps things a lot in a way that I certainly didn't recognize kind of growing up, but I can appreciate it a little bit more now, watching it back all these years later. And yes, so I'll throw in here right now. Logan chimed in because he loves the movie, but he couldn't make the show. So he chimed in with, Robin Hood has always been one of my favorite Disney movies, and it has such a charm and boundless joy to it. It's impossible to not feel happy watching it. Also, it, along with Men in Tights, is my default setting whenever someone brings up Robin Hood, and that's basically like I bring that up here to echo that. If like when I think of Robin Hood, I think of like the iconic sequence that you see in pretty much every Robin Hood story of the archery contest. I think of this version of it. Like this is my default Robin Hood. And a lot of that comes from I didn't watch Men in Tights nearly as much growing up, and then just other renditions just haven't really ever cemented themselves in my mind in the way that this one did. And so yeah, I always think of him in his stork outfit, and shooting the bow and arrow, and like the sheriff of Nottingham, like hitting him so the arrow goes up in the air, and he immediately shoots another arrow to like reset it and reposition it. Like that is such an iconic aspect of this film that. And it has been so long that I just kind of like thought the film ended after that whole thing. Like I thought, he gets found out, but they get away, and so like then we go back into the forest and they do that whole sequence of the phony Prince John, the phony King of England, and then like the whole destitute like Prince John and the Sheriff of Nottingham really like putting the screws to the people. Like I had just that clearly didn't stick with me as much as like the more lighthearted joy of the early parts of the movie growing up. So maybe I watched up to that point a lot, and then that was when I would like hit rewind on the VHS and start over or something like that. But it's still like cool seeing the whole thing there. Any other highlights that you want to kind of bring to the fold?
Honestly, I have so many, but I think one of my favorite absolute moments is, like you mentioned, it could have gone on the cutting room floor, but the early scenes with Robin Hood going behind Sheriff of Nottingham and taking his time to basically repair the damages that the sheriff was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was, the alms for the poor, or the birthday scene, or like any of these things where it's like Robin Hood really putting the wealth that he had stolen to really good use, in a really direct method, was always very entertaining. And I love anytime Robin Hood is in a disguise.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime he's in a disguise, it's phenomenal. Whether it's the like fortune telling, whether it's in the stork outfit, regardless, whatever it is, he's like, it's just such wonderful storytelling of having this trickster character who really, it plays up the trickster aspect of Robin Hood a lot more than it would a lot of other films do. I mentioned that earlier, but I absolutely adore like the animation with the bear, the foxes, the wolves. Like I love Sheriff of Nottingham is just a bigger, fatter version of the guard wolves. Like it's so good. The rhinoceroses are great. Like this is beautifully drawn, wonderfully done. Anthropomorphic creatures that make up this world are just so wonderful, and I just think capture this story of Robin Hood in a way that is unique and special, and I just don't think anything really has ever come close to it. I think it is the best version of Robin Hood that exists out there.
Yeah. Touching on the sheriff as a wolf reminded me of another bit of trivia that I went and pulled up here. Originally, Friar Tuck was meant to be a pig, but they changed him to be a badger to avoid insulting religious sensibilities.
That's a good idea.
And then the Sheriff of Nottingham was originally a goat, but he was changed to a wolf as they seemed better representing villains. So I'm sure PETA out here would have a lot to say about that, but yeah,
that's true. And like, let's be fair, they should have made the Sheriff of Nottingham a pig.
Yeah, he is certainly kind of greedy and grabbing up all those.
But then he wouldn't have that long like gnarled nose, like snout that he has is still so good. Like it's in my memory, just impactful. Just like this, and I think that goes back to the point of these anthropomorphic characters aren't so generic. Each one of them is distinct and different.
Yeah,
and it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah,
also the special touch they get where the sheriff lifts up the cast.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say.
My gosh.
One of the things I love is that the sheriff isn't a complete doofus. Like he definitely, like Robin Hood definitely can get one over on him pretty easily, but like
but he's not
the other townspeople can't as well. And so yeah, they have that, like he is savvy enough to realize that they hid coins in the guy's cast, in the guy's boot, and he just takes it right from them. And so yeah, I was gonna say touch on that same thing. Like I love that element of the character. And then he immediately is kind of shown that like in the hierarchy he is wittier than, or he is more clever than your basic townsperson, but Robin Hood is immediately established as more clever than him, because he basically says like I'd be able to sense Robin Hood from a mile away or whatever, and anytime Robin flatters him any little bit, he's like, oh well, thank you, like thank you, thank you, my good man.
I love that he takes the coin and like hits it into Robin Hood's cup and gets all the coins out of it.
Yep.
Oh, it's like there's so many amazing pieces of animation in this film
Yeah.
that are just so good. Whether it's the reused chasing scenes, don't care. When they're in drag doing it and like running away in the disguise of and, like, the dress comes over on John and he's like running around like the wigs, everything's so great. The flirting.
The tent of rhinoceroses that just like barrels across the
Yes.
arena like multiple times, the same animation style. Like I don't
Yeah.
mind because it's fun. One of the things that jumped out at me, like I definitely remember it, is when Lady Cluck goes into like football mode and it goes into like the almost first person view, but it's like from it's basically third person perspective, but from behind her. And so instead, like for the first time in the movie, instead of seeing things like on the the 2D side of things, like we're seeing her run at people, and yeah, you've got like and I didn't realize it was like the USC fight song is playing in there.
Yeah, it's so good. There's so many great things about it.
Yeah,
like so many small wonderful touches in this film that just I think that's one of the reasons why it still holds up so well is because you have these really classic amazing scenes that we can just we can pull from the entire film and we'll told you what happens in the entire film. But it's so worth the watch. It's 88 minutes of your time front to back. It's incredible. Just watch it.
Yeah, it is an absolute blast. And like one of the last ones I want to give a shout out to is, again, going back to like that introductory scene of them as the fortune tellers. Like that tells you everything you need to know about the mischievous nature that Robin and John are going to have together in this. Like they have so much fun playing those characters. John loves gold so much he sees the gold hubcaps and maneuvers to take them away. And one of the things I love is that it pays off when they go and do the chase scene. Like it could have just been a throwaway gag, but the fact that it causes the wheels to fall off is just a great full circle moment for that otherwise completely mundane gag that didn't need to go anywhere. And yeah, I love that. I love how Hiss is immediately on it. Every time Hiss is constantly figuring it out. But
Cassandra Truth Hiss in this film.
Yeah. But yeah, he's also just he's a slimy little snake. So who cares?
So he's the most trustworthy person. He's a slimy snake, so nobody trusts him.
Yeah.
It's sad. Poor Hiss. Well, that's it. Poor Hiss. Everybody else on the bad guy side can pound sand. And here's the thing. He was also making off with the money and stuff, and he loved money.
Mm-hmm.
Man, no, that was just look into my eyes, and then just his bits trying, and it feels funny because it was it's like these bits that you expected from Khan.
Mm-hmm.
That. Just don't work for Hiss because he's a different character.
Yeah, and that's maybe even that's another element of why I associate the two characters is the hypnotizing bit that Prince John's and he's trying to help Prince John. He's trying to help him get over his need to suck his thumb and all that stuff. But Prince John immediately stops it and repeatedly ties him up in a knot and stuff like that. And it's yeah,
oh
if he were a more capable side villain type of character, he would have. He would have been the one pulling the strings and because if he has hypnotizing powers, he could have easily kind of messed with John throughout everything. But yeah,
but it just it doesn't work out. But it's also a great subversion because you expect the snake character to be hypnotizing people, and they're it just works. This film works on so many different levels of subverting expectations, whether it's in Disney animation rules themselves in regards to Khan versus Hiss and the hypnotizing stuff, or it's to subversions of the way that Robin Hood and Little John meet, which is going across a bridge, fighting to decide who gets to cross over first. Instead of doing after you, my good sir, no, after you, my good sir. That whole shtick is entirely a subversion of their origin story, and it. Otherwise, you just get, they're really cool friends. They're really close friends, and they're having some jokes, talking posh. But if you understand the context of it, it's they're completely making fun of how absurd and stupid their meeting is in the original tale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fantastic. I love it.
I mean, it's are like it is up there because I certainly can point to the Robin Hood Men in Tights version of that meeting where they have the bow staff and it keeps like splitting in two and they ultimately end up going like
Yeah.
yeah. So it's I can appreciate that is an iconic sequence that you see in a lot of those films, and so yeah, it's a fun different take on it as well. Yeah, I think it is an all around great film. I'm trying to see if there's any last little bits of trivia I want to pull in here, but I don't think so. I think we are good to wrap it up there. So yeah, on a scale of A+ to F, I give it a solid A+. It is
100%
a
agree.
top tier, probably the best of that like early, like probably the best for me, for my money, the best of the pre Little Mermaid era of Disney films. Admittedly, like I haven't gone back and watched a lot of them a ton, but it's just such a fun, good time that it's always a joy to watch. And the fact that it's got it's building off of the incredible source material you mentioned, kind of that dream of like being able to hurt the rich to help the poor, being able to be justified in doing bad things for good reasons. Like Robin Hood and The Count of Monte Cristo are like two of my all-time favorite stories because of that aspect, because of that nature of those stories. So I am a sucker for any time those kinds of stories get like remade or especially in the very eat the rich era that we live in today.
Very much so.
I will not be surprised if at least one of the allegedly greenlit GameStop movies that were given the go ahead in the last week or two, have that very much as kind of like the framework is like a Robin Hood story, when all is said and done.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are in agreement there. A+ from you as well.
A+, 100%. Yeah. It's one of the best Disney products of all time. Whether it's film, movies, music, whatever, it's up there in the upper echelon of just Western. Like just I don't want to be like in the Western canon of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Robin Hood as a story is definitely up there. It's pervasive and it's existed to this day. But I would definitely have to say that Disney's Robin Hood is the best, the best version that I've seen in my lifetime, and I've watched a lot of bad Robin Hood.
Mm-hmm.
I watched a lot of bad Robin Hood. I watched Russell Crowe pretend to be a guy named Robin Hood.
Yeah.
And like I watched a lot of bad Robin Hood, but I have never been as entranced and as filled with joy and wonder, not wonder, but just joy and happiness. It really feels like I'm reliving part of my childhood because I used to watch this film so often.
Mm-hmm.
I wore the tape out on this film when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like I adore it, and to see it, like to get to talk about it now has been just an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. It's one I didn't even think about it until about like maybe midway through the movie or something like that. I think at some point they kind of show like a map of England or something like that, and it dawned on me in that moment. I was like, oh, that's right. Like I just played through like this era of England in Assassin's Creed Valhalla recently.
No,
and
that's
I mean it's a couple hundred years earlier, but because it's close enough for Ubisoft's tastes, I guess. They definitely have like there is a Robin Hood and his merry men. You can kind of do a couple side mystery things with them in the game. And Maid Marian and stuff like that. They're like versions of those characters kind of come to play. Like you do an archery contest for one of them or whatever. So it definitely gets some love, and like even just going around like Nottingham or whatever, it's Snotting. It's because it's Nottingham in the game from that era. So yeah, it was interesting putting that in the context of all this as well, or thinking about that. So solid film here, A+ from both of us. Diving into the extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one that Disney Plus will give you. You have The Fox and the Hound, The Sword and the Stone, Aladdin, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Cinderella, Mulan, and This one is the one that like stands out to me as like the weirdest of the bunch. The Emperor's New Groove, which I love. I love that movie
Yeah.
like wonderfully, but like you have kind of the like the classics of the era and then, a few of the more modern standards in Aladdin and Mulan. And then Emperor's New Groove just is like, I mean,
It's a big guy, little guy
Yeah.
singing and doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense in that context.
For
sure.
Extracurriculars, you watching anything else on Disney Plus these days, Cam?
Right now, I am not.
Have you been watching
Well, that's not true.
WandaVision at all?
I am watching WandaVision. I was about to take that back.
Okay.
I'm like, actually, I've been watching WandaVision, and I haven't watched this last week's episode yet.
Mm.
I was in the middle of doing something when my brother-in-law and my sister watched it.
Mm.
So I have to catch up on it probably the next day or two. But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it. I can't wait to. Everybody said that this is a great episode. I'm really looking forward to it. So
Yeah.
WandaVision I've been watching, and then it's just been really cool having like all of the Marvel films. You can watch them in like the chronological order of them and everything. So that's been cool.
Mm-hmm.
So you can start things off by watching Captain America, because chronologically that takes place before everything else.
Yeah.
And so it kind of like it's a really cool way of like rediscovering the Marvel universe in a chronological sort of way, because it also like Captain Marvel is going to happen before come before a lot of films.
Yep.
And so you get to see that kind of growth.
Yep.
So to speak.
Very cool. I pretty much the core thing that I'm watching, and then I will go through and like throughout the week I rewatch it like 2 or 3 more times, has been WandaVision. If you want to hear my thoughts on the first 4 episodes, you can catch last week's episode where I kind of sat down and discussed a lot of them, hot off the heels of watching episode number 4. And then I did, in anticipation for the eventual dinosaurs episode that we sit down and do, I did start to watch the first episode. I didn't get too far into it before, getting distracted and looking at something else. But like,
I need to watch. That's a show I need to pick back up, because when it was on Netflix, I watched the entire thing. So
nice. And then also, just as I'll throw this out there, it's because I want to say it's coming next month, I think. But they dropped the trailer for the Mighty Ducks reboot. And I was like, yes,
I'm pretty stoked for
quack, quack, quack.
Quack. Except it's not Quack, because the Quacks are the bad guys, Trevor.
No, quacks weren't the bad guys.
No. In the new one,
you're
yeah.
saying in the new one? Yeah, it's
in the reboot.
Were they were the bad guys the ducks in the new one?
Yeah, because the Mighty Ducks no longer stand for what the Mighty Ducks used to stand for.
Okay, they're definitely
That's the premise.
They definitely kind of. We'll see how Cobra Kai like this one is. But yeah, it's
very much the Cobra Kai premise of like doing that.
It was fascinating because in the trailer, Gordon Bombay definitely seems to be fulfilling the like Hans role now. Was it Hans? The old guy that like runs the skate shop. It's been a long time since I watched any of those movies as well, but yeah, that was I was like, cool. I'm excited for this, and I didn't realize it's the mom from Gilmore Girls is like the female lead of the series. It seems.
Hells yeah.
So yeah, should be a good one. Looking forward to seeing that one when it starts.
I thought you were
going to
say the mom from Gilmore Girls is the hot mom in this film, because there's always a hot mom in every film.
Okay, sure.
Except in the third film, where it's actually a subversion, because it's the hot dad who's their new coach. And then you find out later that he has a daughter that he takes on like the ice rink because she's in a wheelchair, and he's awesome. But you find out that he's like a jerk with a heart of gold, but also a stunning jawline and very handsome.
I clearly have not watched the Mighty Ducks movies in a long time and do not remember that. Or like I remember 1 and 2 in particular, and then because 3 is basically they go to college, right? It's because it's 1 is the Mighty Ducks, 2 is
3 is they go to high school is where they go.
Is it high school? Is it only high school?
It's high school. They all get in on a hockey scholarship to a preparatory high school.
Okay, I could have sworn it was college, but I guess that's maybe just me like assuming that they had aged up by that point. Okay.
They were definitely in that like older age for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's right before what's his name started doing Dawson's Creek. So. Josh Jackson, right before he started doing Dawson's Creek.
Well, we will have to do some eventual Mighty Ducks episodes of That D Plus Show. Yeah, that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Cameron, for joining me. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to or give some love to, Cam?
Yeah, I just want to give some shout out and love to Like a lot of my friends who expressed a lot of excitement to me. I'm returning to PC gaming. I'll be returning to streaming sometime soon. Once I get some things figured out. Really looking. So shout out. Look forward to those streams from me. They're going to be some fun stuff. I'm going to pick back up Undertale finally. It's been about a year since I played it, since I got to that point in Undertale, but I'm looking forward to picking that back up, starting up these streamings a little bit more regularly. Help accompany kind of Trevor's efforts in doing the Let's Plays, so we can get more gaming content on the YouTube page and on our website. So hopefully we want to do that. But I also want to give an enormous shout out to good friend at Fred Monty. Monty, she just joined Gaming Magazine, which is an LGBTQ plus focused outlet, and she discusses the anime Given, which is a queer focused anime in regard that also has some really amazing music in it. That is just awesome, and it's a really great story. Uh, really was a really good highlight when it came out a few years ago. The film that they just put out for it just came out, I think, yesterday on Crunchyroll. So massive shout out to her right up on that series and kind of like why it speaks to her and why it is a successful telling of a kind of story that struggles to be told um, in an unfetishized way, in a genre that normally fetishizes. If there are gay characters, they're usually very fetishized or made the butt of jokes.
Mm.
So she does a great job with that. I want to give her a shout out just because I read it before, like this afternoon. So
Cool. Very cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will give a shout out to the Let's Play I posted this morning as we are recording, yesterday as this episode goes live, of me playing Floppy Nights. I took a detour from my typical aversion to playing like Steam games and PC gaming, and played the demo of Floppy Nights. This is a game that really caught my eye at PAX East last year, and they released a new demo this week as part of the Steam Game Festival. So I hopped into it and enjoyed that. So you can check that out. Me playing for about 50 minutes. It's a card deck builder based tactical strategy game. So it's like
yeah,
part like admittedly, I haven't played a ton of like card games, but the one that jumps to mind is Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. So it's like part that and then part like Fire Emblem, but more Fire Emblem than Chain of Memories.
and Chain of Memories. Yeah.
But like your moves are like you have a deck of 5 cards basically each turn, and so you can only move based on the cards you have, or attack, or play other enemies or whatever. So yeah, it's a really cool game. I'm very much looking forward to that. Also, keep an eye out next week. Originally, what was going to go live this morning was Balan Wonderworld, me playing the demo of that, the new platformer from Square Enix. I have that recorded. It was originally scheduled for this morning. It is now bumped to Tuesday's episode, Tuesday's Let's Play episode. That is a game. So stay tuned to watch me playing that for the first time, because I went into that like sight unseen. I'd heard the name popping up and a few people kind of tweeting about it and stuff, and so I was like, all right, let me
It's
see what this one is about, and it is a thing.
it evokes a lot of feelings of people really look at Square Enix now and see the quote unquote JRPG company, but there was a period of time where Squaresoft especially really went places with different kind of game genres and really push their teams to the boundaries, and it didn't always pay off, but it was always great to see
I mean, I'm still waiting for a Bouncer sequel or
Square
reboot.
a bouncers.
I played
Like the main
I
guy's
played
name
that.
is Dog, isn't it?
I don't remember. I remember nothing about that game apart from it was a game where you could like there were 3 kind of main protagonists, and you went into each chapter picking which one you were going to play as. And
Yeah.
so you didn't get like the full picture of the story until you'd played through as like all 3 of them. Because like in some scenes, like you're standing in the room with the guy on the phone, but if you're not playing as the guy on the phone, you don't hear the conversation. You don't hear the other side of the phone conversation until you play as that character and stuff. And so, like, I remember that being like
which is cool.
mind blowing as like coming into that game as the guy who like only knew SquareSoft from like all the Final Fantasy games. And then like I really enjoyed it for what it was, and but like and like now I think back on it as like, why did they never bring back the bouncer or make another bouncer?
There's a lot
Yeah.
of these games that
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like
absolutely.
there's a depth of library that Square has, that I really hope Balan Wonderland, no matter like really no
Wonder
matter how it
World.
comes,
I think I mess
Wonderworld,
up a
sorry,
couple times in the Let's Play calling it Wonderland, but it is Wonder World.
it is Wonderworld. That makes sense. Balan Wonderworld, I think, is even if it's not like stupendous or fantastic, as long as it's like somewhat decent, I would really just still hope to see like Square keep flexing these other muscles that they have that they have a history of doing in a way that reminds me a lot of like the PS1 era.
My prediction for Balan Wonderworld is a weird thing to be wrapping up the Robin Hood
Yeah,
episode
D
of.
plus show.
But my prediction for it is it will go the way of Knack, in that it will become a meme and people will think it is so bad that it's good, and we'll end up getting meme sequels of this game, based on the 2 levels of it I played. That's kind of what it gives me very Knack vibes. But that's enough about Knack and Balan Wonderworld and anything else gaming related.
This is an offshoot conversation at the end of D plus show.
Yeah, this has been that D plus show. If you liked what you heard prior to the last 2 minutes, please rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.